conference, and consequently it got pulled back just a little bit. Mr. Secretary, this is your first formal budget hearing before our subcommittee. While I am disappointed you didn't arrive in a covered wagon, on behalf of our members, I'd like to offer our congratulations on your confirmation. I was reading your biography, just the short one that they give us. And I'm going to read this into the record because I think it demonstrates your commitment. Under his leadership in North Dakota as North Dakota governor, passed the largest tax increase, or the largest tax cut in state history, and dramatically reduced red tape. As a testament to Burgum's leadership, Forbes named him America's best entrepreneurial governor. During his tenure, North Dakota experienced the highest growth in real GDP and had the lowest unemployment rate in the country. That's a pretty good record. So, welcome here today. Our hearing today will address the fiscal year 2026 budget priorities for the Department of Interior and provide you with an opportunity to outline our goals for the department. I thoroughly enjoyed our sit-down meeting, hearing firsthand about your time in the private sector as well as governor and how you plan to apply lessons learned from these experiences to address the many challenges facing the department. As a native North Dakotan and former CEO of a successful tech company, you bring a fresh perspective to the department. I look forward to learning how you plan to reshape the agency while promoting domestic energy production, unlocking critical minerals, addressing the maintenance backlog at our national parks and public lands, and meeting our treaty and trust obligations throughout Indian country. This committee stands ready to roll up our sleeves and work with you to implement efficiencies and reduce redundancies across the agency so that the focus can be on investments that advance the department's core mission. Overall, the President's skinny budget for FY 2026 request provides roughly $10.6 billion for the Department of Interior programs under this subcommittee's jurisdiction. While we recognize the administration proposed some deep funding cuts that will likely do not see eye to eye with some of these, especially when it comes to Indian programs and the operations of our national parks. Today's hearings is just the first step in our month-long budget review process. I'll note that when it comes to funding discussions ahead, this subcommittee, under both Republican and Democratic leadership, remains committed to upholding the responsibilities of fulfilling our treaty and trust responsibilities with tribes. I know you have extensive experience engaging with tribes during your time as governor. We look forward to working closely with you to prioritize this year's funding to address the greatest tribal needs, including education, law enforcement, and land management issues. In terms of policy, I look forward to learning how you are working with the White House to unleash America's energy, streamline permitting and the Endangered Species Act reviews, and improve wildland firefighting. I also want to personally thank you and the administration for halting the Lava Ridge Wind Project in Idaho, something that had literally no local support whatsoever. As you well know, this out-of-touch project failed to prioritize the concerns of Idahoans and was rammed through by the previous administration. Secretary Burgum, thank you again for joining us this morning. Going forward, I hope we can continue to keep an open line of communications to ensure that as this committee moves through the budget process, we can continue making sound investments to advance the administration's agenda and ensure the long-term well-being of the department. With that, I'd yield to Ranking Member Ms. Pingree for any opening remarks that she may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing this morning. And Secretary Burgum, thank you very much for being with us today. I appreciated that the slight delay in committee gave me a chance to say an initial hello to you, and nice to meet, even though I represent Maine, a fellow Midwesterner since I was born in Minnesota. Yeah, sure, you betcha. I do want to thank you for bringing your many skills as a former governor and a businessman to this very important position. The Department of Interior is tasked with protecting and managing our natural resources and cultural heritage, to providing scientific information about those resources and honoring our trust and treaty responsibility. But I will warn you, I am very concerned about the state of the Department of Interior. From my view, in just 4 months, the department has been destabilized, and there's been a stunning decline in its ability to meet its mission. Given your extensive executive experience, I am disappointed that you would allow this to happen. In partnership with Elon Musk's what I consider a rogue agency, the DOGE, you have illegally canceled grants for conservation, for ecosystem restoration, and other important work. Over 1,700 probationary employees have been recklessly fired, and 7,600 people, or 11% of the Interior workforce, have been pushed to resign. These are not just numbers. These people are experts and dedicated public servants with decades of programmatic and institutional knowledge that is critically needed to ensure the department fulfills its mission and is a guardian of our public lands. To make matters worse, the agency has a hiring freeze, and you are considering even further reductions in force. I don't see this ending well for this precious agency that this committee is dedicated to oversee. And this committee has devoted hundreds of hours to nurturing this agency. I'm very proud to serve on a committee that generally works in a bipartisan way to make sure that the Department of Interior stays strong. Further, due to the policies you have instituted, employees are hamstrung from accomplishing everyday tasks by absurdly limiting credit card expenditures to $1. This is no way to efficiently run an organization. In fact, these actions seem to be designed to obstruct employees from doing their job. Even the National Park Service feels that it's been under attack. Ahead of peak season, you have gutted staff, so my national park, like Acadia in my home state of Maine, is understaffed and without the resources needed to keep summer visitors safe. Our parks are pristine and need to be protected. Fiscal year 2026 is equally devastating, with a proposed cut to the department of 30%. That budget eviscerates the U.S. Geological Survey with a proposed $564 million cut, targeting scientific research on natural hazards, ecosystems, water, and earth mapping. These programs help us monitor and provide real-time earthquake and hazard information. They strengthen our assessment of groundwater and surface water systems, and they help ensure our national security by informing the management of our mineral and energy resources. Without these programs at USGS, our communities will be left vulnerable to natural disasters and deprived of the scientific data that guides responsible land management. This budget, with a 30% cut, shamefully abandons our trust and treaty obligations to Native Americans, slashing the Bureau of Indian Affairs Public Safety and Justice programs by 19% when we are already only meeting a fraction of the need. The budget also chooses to eliminate funding for a desperately needed school construction, leaving a $1 billion repair backlog untouched. So, Secretary Burgum, the document we're here to discuss today is more than just a budget. It's a blueprint for dismantling the very mission of the Department of Interior, making it impossible to protect our natural resources and iconic national parks or uphold our commitments to tribal communities now and for future generations. As the ranking member on this committee, I wholeheartedly oppose these cuts. I cannot stand by and watch this agency be hollowed out. So thank you again for being here this morning. I'm sorry that we disagree on the perspective on how this department should be run, and I do hope you are here to give us a rationale for these decisions or to work with us to reverse them. And I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. We were going to have opening statements by Mr. Cole and Ms. DeLauro, but they've been delayed, obviously. So we'll just go on with your testimony right now, Mr. Secretary. Your floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of President Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget blueprint request for the Department of Interior and discuss what we're doing to make America safer, stronger, more beautiful, and more prosperous. As you all know extremely well, the department oversees both onshore and offshore energy resources. We manage federal trust responsibilities with our tribal nations. We deliver water to the West. We oversee hundreds of wildlife refuges and national parks and cultural sites. The resources that we sustainably govern directly impact the lives of every American every day. Interior managed resources hold a significant position on America's balance sheet. The public lands and minerals within the interior domain include more than 480 million acres of surface land, 750 million acres of subsurface and mineral estate, and more than 2.5 billion acres of offshore. Our national resources are national assets that belong to the public, and they should be responsibly managed to help grow our economy, help balance our budget, and generate a revenue for the American citizens. With common sense approaches and modern systems, we can increase the returns for our citizens, strengthen our economy, create great paying and meaningful jobs, all while protecting our beautiful lands, our abundant wildlife, and our clean air and clean water. The President's 2026 budget blueprint requests $11.9 billion in current authority for the department, providing significant savings to the American people. Of that amount, $10.6 billion is within the jurisdiction of the Interior Environment Appropriations Subcommittee. The 2026 budget for the department features strategic investments to further President Trump's commitments to energy dominance, which is the foundation of American prosperity, national security, and world peace. We are focused on increasing the production of affordable, reliable energy on federal lands. We've already taken some common sense measures to increase production in the Gulf by 100,000 barrels a day with a simple policy change. With this will help reduce the price at the pump for American families, and we proudly announced that the first historic lease sale in the newly renamed Gulf of America will occur later this year. We're also busy rectifying the mountain of restrictions designed to restrict resource development in Alaska. Last month, we removed layers of red tape that undermined coal production on federal lands. Clean American coal is a triple win for our country because thermal coal provides reliable and affordable baseload electricity at a time when we need more electricity than ever. Metallurgical coal is the foundation for bringing back our steel industry, which we need for national security. And the mining and refining of coal that contains critical and rare earth minerals is essential to secure our own domestic supply chains for our defense, transportation, and tech industries, because today we are in a huge position of vulnerability relative to our critical mineral supply chain. Right now, America is in an artificial intelligence arms race with China. This race is going to be won not only by technology, but by electricity production. Keeping domestic coal-fired power generation open will help us win this contest while driving down electricity costs for American families and improving the reliability of our grid. The department is also undertaking efforts to establish our position as the leading producer and processor of critical and rare earth minerals, which will create jobs and prosperity at home, strengthen domestic supply chains for the United States and its allies, increase our national security, and reduce the global influence of adversarial states. Preventing and combating wildfires is vitally important to protect people, communities, and the environment. Nearly 65,000 wildfires burned more than 8.9 million acres across the United States last year, endangering communities, critical infrastructure, and local economies. Federal wildlife risk mitigation and suppression responsibilities for wildlife fire, as this committee knows, is currently split across 5 agencies in 2 different departments. We've got duplicative and ineffective structures that couldn't be improved. This budget proposes reforming the federal wildland fire management to create an operational efficiencies by consolidating and unifying federal wildland fire responsibilities into a new centralized federal wildland fire service at the Department of Interior. This new service will streamline federal wildfire suppression response, risk mitigation efforts, and coordinate with non-federal partners, including states, locales, and tribes, to combat the wildfire crisis. The Department of Interior upholds the federal government's unique trust responsibility by fostering government-to-government relations between the federal government and federally recognized tribes, American Indians, and Alaska Natives. This budget supports programs at the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Education, sustaining the federal government's support of the core programs that benefit tribal communities. Since becoming Interior Secretary, I've had the opportunity to travel to our national parks, historic sites, Bureau of Land Management, and Bureau of Reclamation, some incredible locations, including the Hoover Dam. Bureau of Reclamation is the #2 hydropower producer in America. And I've also visited the wildlife refuges to learn and hear more from the leadership on the ground at each of these places. We're instituting changes to get more people actually working on the front lines, and we're looking forward to an outstanding summer at our historic sites, parks, and refuges. By opening more areas to hunting and outdoor recreation, we're helping to drive tourism, create jobs, and generate revenue for local communities, all while promoting responsible stewardship of our natural resources. Interior is also focused on streamlining our core business operations, which will result in significantly improved efficiencies and lower costs for Americans and will benefit each of the bureaus within Interior. This budget is about putting America first and doing the best for American taxpayer. As Interior moves forward, these initiatives set the foundation for a renewed focus on responsible resource management and economic growth. I appreciate that the subcommittee has strongly supported the department's mission, and I look forward to working closely with you to advance these priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If the chairman of the full committee and the ranking member of the full committee come in, we'll let them make an opening statement when they come. First, let me ask you about this. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the President's skinny budget request proposed cuts to the Department of Interior that we may not be able to fully replicate in our FY26 bill. You may have seen that we had EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin testify before our subcommittee last week, and I asked him the same question that I'm going to ask you. If Congress chooses to provide discretionary appropriations for the agency that are levels above the president's the president's budget request, how would you handle that? In other words, would you spend the amounts provided in an enacted bill and for the specific programs that Congress identifies?
Yes, that would be the law.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. I also wanted to take a moment to ask about land exchanges. Secretary Burgum, in order to assess and execute all land exchanges that come before the department, does the agency have all the tools it needs to carry out the current processes, or are additional authorities necessary? And I assume that the processes include, you have to have appraisals and all of that type of thing. You have to do public hearings. You have to have tribal consultations, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have all the tools to do that, or are additional authorities necessary?
Well, we have a good set of tools in the tool bag today. And one example of that we've already completed was a land exchange with the state of Utah that we completed back in February. It's about 200,000 acres of federal and 188,000 acres of state. This is a project that had worked on for some time, but was able to get completed in February, and was able to sign that with Utah Governor Spencer Cox. As you know, out west, we've got plenty of places where we've got a checkerboard of land. And in this case, we were able to trade lands to sort of fill in the checkerboard for the state and fill in the checkerboard at the federal level. In the case of the lands received from Utah, we were able to fill in a checkerboard of a wilderness area that was a federal wilderness area that will remain wilderness area, but is now doesn't create the complications of us trying to have every other section be wilderness area with the state having a different set of regulations, a different set of people managing those resources in between. Conversely, at the state level, the state now has got contiguous opportunities to choose whether they want to do that for affordable housing, whether they want to do it for recreation, whether they want to do it for state parks or state recreation. So it was definitely a win-win in both cases. And and in this case, these are public lands that remained in public hands because it was a swap between the federal government and a state. I think there's more opportunity to do that. As you know, when the railroads transected the West as one of the incentives to get those railroads built, they gave at one time in the private sector these checkerboard of land as an incentive. And so I think there's a big opportunity for those kinds of swaps. And I also, as governor of North Dakota, was chairman of the land board. So I've got 8 years of experience of where we were able to, once in state hands, sometimes it was better for us to move those lands, down into more local control for local uses. And so we were able to do that because, again, as a general principle, as a governor, I've found that state game and fish, state land management, state grazing associations, local, all this. I have to say I never met someone from D.C. that cared more about the land, the water, the wildlife, the fish at the local level than the people in those states. And I know that the representatives at this table have all come from states that have got deep commitments to the land and the wildlife and their environment. So I think that there's plenty of opportunities for us to do both, which is have more efficient use of public lands and do all the protection we need about the things the public cares about, that we all care about so deeply.
But apparently you do have the authority to do this. You do have the tools to do this.
We do, and we certainly will be taking a look to see if there's other things that are getting in the way of efficiently using public lands. I think in particular we're paying attention to the western states. I think it's maybe not well known, but we do have in states that are represented on this committee. Utah, over 60% of that is federal land. Nevada, over 80%. Alaska, Nevada's #1 in terms of percentage owned by the federal government. Alaska, massive amounts of federal land, and in many cases, we're restricting the opportunities for those states that should have the same opportunity under the United States of America to prosper as we have other states. We've got states in the east, including the 13 states that were part of the original colonies. None of them have more than 2% of federal land. And I don't think any of them would stand up and say we need more federal ownership in our states. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard people saying that. So it's I think there's a path forward here.
There is. Idaho is third on the list with 64% federal land. And I will tell you, as I've told the reporters and stuff, the reason people live in the West, the reason people live in Idaho, because we love our public lands, and we want to make sure that they remain public so that your favorite hunting grounds or fishing hole or hiking or snow machining area is not cut off because of private ownership that bans travel. And in Idaho, travel doesn't mean, they've closed this road, I'll just go down another mile and take the next road. It sometimes means you're leaving the state and going into Montana and coming back across the mountains to your unreasonable stuff. So those are concerns I have personally about access and public lands for public use. So anyway, let me stop for just a minute. And
I was going to say, you might have one member that would be happy that they came to Montana for a while before they came back in.
Yeah. Mr. Cole, Chairman of the full committee. Go ahead with your opening statement.
Well, I'm not going to do the opening statement. Having arrived late, I'll submit it for the record. Let me make a couple of quick comments. Number one, I apologize for being late, Mr. Secretary, but your boss was in our conference, and I have a rule: I don't get up and walk out on the President of the United States. So
that's a very good rule.
And seems to have worked well over the years. And but I also wanted to say how glad I am that he made the decision to appoint you to this job. I think you are superbly suited for it. You have an excellent background. You know the issues, frankly, better than any incoming secretary that I've seen during my tenure in Congress. And I particularly appreciate the fact you had such strong tribal support from your home state, from people you dealt with for many years and thought very highly of your tenure there. And I particularly, coming from Oklahoma, appreciate the energy background, the energy interest, and the sheer knowledge that you bring to this job and what that's going to mean for the country going forward. You're going to like this committee, quite frankly. You won't agree with them on every single thing, but Mike is one of our best chairmen, without a doubt, and Ms. Pingree is one of our very best ranking members, and of course has chaired this committee in the past as well. And they know how to strike a deal. They know how to work together. And when they fight, they do it in an appropriate way. So, again, I think you're going to enjoy working with the members on both sides, frankly, of the aisle in this particular subcommittee. With that, as you know, and we've had the opportunity to discuss offline before, I do care, and I know this committee cares on both sides of the aisle very, very strongly about tribal issues. So I wanted to ask you, can you talk a little bit, maybe you've done, are we into questioning as well, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? Okay, I assume we were. Can you talk a little bit about the cut to BIA operations of Indian programs and BIA education construction?
Again, and
BIE, I should have said.
yes. Well, first of all, let me just start with BIE. There's some incredible challenges. Let's just step back from the budget a little bit. Sure. I mean, there's 125,000 K-12 kids involved in this BIE system. And the challenges there are greater than just the budget dollars and the construction. It's interesting that this is a similar size. The state of North Dakota had about exactly 125,000 students in a K-12 system. In North Dakota, we had BIE schools, we had tribal schools, and we had public schools in North Dakota, and a small number of private, parochial schools. If you stacked them all up together, the ones where we were spending the highest dollar amount and had the worst outcomes was the BIE schools. And as a governor, this was frustrating because I felt, again, every enrolled member of every tribe is also a North Dakota citizen and a U.S. citizen. And when I took office and when I campaigned, I said, doesn't matter if you voted for me or not, as governor, I'm responsible for everybody here. And we're, to the degree that whether it's roads or public safety or education, felt that responsibility. But the BIE schools were tough to get it because they were isolated. We had a better shot at helping the tribal schools that were tribally run but still could get state aid than we could on BIE. So I'm bringing a lens where I've had an opportunity to see this thing where it's not, funding is the issue, and there's a lot of deferred maintenance out there. I mean, for sure there is, and we need that, but we've got to figure out there's something else going on here that we have to take a look at other than just budget. I mean, I think we've seen that across education in this country. It's not always a correlative between the more money you spend, the better outcomes you get. So that's something that we're dedicated as we get our team on board and bring people on board. We're trying to really dig into this, dig in to understand, what the challenges and the opportunities are. And I think that, they're not spread. There's many states that do not have any BIE schools. And so there's an opportunity to look for deeper partnerships between the states. And also to say at the tribal thing, because some of the tribes that have taken over the responsibility for those BIE schools at a local level, some of them have got an interest in the resources to do it. The really sad place when you think about synergies in states like mine, we got one tribe where you've got a BIE school and a tribal school, and they're within a mile of each other, and you're like, okay, why wouldn't they be working together? I mean, is it because they're worried about 5 less spots on the starting basketball team, or is it because of some economic incentive that's causing people to say, hey, we want to keep the tribal school because of the pay structure for teachers and school board members versus a public school where maybe school board members are not getting paid? I mean, I think we got to really dig in and try to find out why in those cases it wouldn't be just a natural desire to get synergies between those existing structures. And I think it's going to be on a community by community, case by case basis. But this is we're not talking about millions and millions of, I mean, by comparison, Clark County has got 300,000 students in one county. I mean, we're talking about 100. These are small rural schools, which I'm very familiar with. But even within those, I think there's a way where we can find some solutions. So yeah, people will be concerned about a proposed budget that has lower dollars, but I'm more concerned about how do we find a long-term solution, because we could fund it at last year's level, fund it at a higher level, and I don't think the question you should be asking me is, are we getting better outcomes? I mean, we're running an education system, and that's the thing that we've got to be focused on together. So we'd love to come back and work with all of you as we try to really pull this thing back, because if we have a trust responsibility, we shouldn't be just saying, let's give more money to the worst performing K-12 system in the country. And it's not because we don't have teachers that care, because there's people that are in these systems that, care deeply, but let's go figure that problem out. And I don't know if you've got staff that's focused on BIE in particular, but this is one of the issues that requires some real attention.
Well, I certainly agree with that, but I also think that kids have to have a good place to learn too. And sometimes that's an expression of whether or not you care about them very much. And I've been to some excellent BIE schools and some excellent things. I totally agree with your emphasis on culture and outcome, but I've been to some places I wouldn't send my kid to. It's simply because the resources aren't there and haven't ever been there. Not your responsibility, you just showed up. But, I've actually toured a lot of these schools with my friend here, the chairman, and other places. And tribes will vary, as you know, greatly in their ability to resource things. It makes a lot of difference if you happen to be fortunate enough and have mineral wealth, or you happen to have a location and you've got a gaming operation. I don't find tribes being short in taking care of their own people when they've got the resources to do it. I have often found the federal government very short in fulfilling its trust responsibility. So I just say that is something we'll be looking at. I appreciate having you there.
But I would say, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you on that last point because, of course, we've got an energy tribe in North Dakota that we've worked hard to get the Fed, work with them side by side to cut federal red tape to allow them to develop their energy resources. We worked on tax sharing agreements to make sure that we had fair agreements with them. And once they had their economy going, they had some of the nicest schools in our state are in MHA Nation. I mean, the facilities, whatever. I mean, these guys have gone out and, I mean, they will put the dollars back into facilities and education if we can help them get their economic development. So it's tied. I mean, the economic development is tied to their ability to manage these facilities.
Absolutely. I remember talking to a good mutual friend we had, Mr. Ham, Continental, and we were talking about the difficulty of energy exploration and production on non-federal land, which, North Dakota is famous as a energy-friendly and supportive state, versus what happened the minute he crossed an imaginary line onto an Indian reservation. It was not the tribes; it was the just relentless, federal regulation, fee structure, everything else. And so I commend your work in that because, again, if they have resources, they'll put them in the right places. And
well, and I would say I've always said that the hardest job in politics is not a representative or a senator or a governor. It's being a tribal chair or a tribal member because they have to deal with layers of federal regulation in addition to. My
mother was the first Native American woman in the state Senate in Oklahoma, and I asked her once, "Why didn't you do tribal politics?" She said, "It's too tough. It's like family politics," and it is. Can I have? I'm using my time, but I have one more area I particularly wanted to ask you about, if I may. December disaster supplemental, which again arrived before you got here, provided $50 million for Historic Preservation Fund and $2.3 billion for the National Park Service to reconstruct historic sites and Park Service units that were damaged from disaster events such as devastating tornadoes, which frankly hit my district. So, and I'm glad to see the notice of funding opportunity announced for the Historic Preservation Fund. Money last week, but I am a bit frustrated it's taken as long for NOFO to be published because it's only the first step in the process and these communities need help. So what's the department's timeline for reviewing these applications and getting money kind of moving toward these communities?
Well, we're trying to accelerate where we are. Some of those have recently been released. Others we've been working in conjunction with OMB and other entities on getting to the next spot and getting those dollars out. So,
well, I appreciate you taking a personal interest in that. Look, a lot of people are working hard to try and get stuff out the door. We know that, but I just wanted to notice that I've got both historic national park areas that have been hit hard, Chickasaw National Recreation Area, where we have some progress moving, and I'm appreciative of that. But particularly a little town called Sulphur, Oklahoma, historic downtown area, and literally leveled by a tornado, actually multiple tornadoes in the same night. So if you can look at those things, I know other communities and other districts are in the same thing, but just moving it along faster would make a huge difference, and appreciate you looking into that if you can and staying on top of it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Shelley, I just want to say on the topic that Tom was just talking about with Bureau of Indian Education and buildings and reducing the funding for buildings. I agree with everything you said about finding out why these schools aren't performing and what needs to be done to change them and address that. I got no problem with that. In fact, it ought to be done. That doesn't change the fact that we're talking about facilities here and facilities across. I mean, Tom and I have been to, as he said, many tribes, and he said he wouldn't send his kids to some of them. I've often said I wouldn't board my dog overnight at some of them because they're dangerous. And so that's what this committee has been focused on, is trying to make sure that we have the resources to build the schools that these kids need. And as Tom so eloquently said, that oftentimes means to those kids how much you think about them and stuff. So, Ms. Pingree?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And let me just reiterate, so you hear it from both sides of the aisle, and you've heard that we are, Representative McCollum has been a former chair as well, and so we are very united on this tribal funding, and I think that hits a very sensitive spot on the schools. And I understand some of the concerns that you've been raised about duplication and a variety of other things about quality of schools, but funding construction is an ongoing huge issue here. I know I worked on a Passamaquoddy school from the time I got here to many, many years trying to make sure that they got it across the finish line, and it can take, decades to get the funding for these schools. And while, as you've all noted, there are tribes that have the resources to do amazing things in their own community, many tribes are just not in that position. So I hope we can restore that funding level, and certainly you'll hear from this committee that we're interested in that. And I wanted to start with a question on, it's following up a little bit on what both my colleagues have mentioned on how the funding gets spent and allocated. So the continuing resolution for 2025 enacted more than 2 months ago, was enacted more than 2 months ago. Now we're 8 months into the fiscal year. And given that timing, it's just critical that the department quickly obligate the appropriated funding. So my example on that is similar to what Mr. Cole was asking about, but it's actually a different pot of money. I'm hearing concerns from the Maine State Historic Preservation Office that they have not received the state-by-state apportionment, nor has the Park Service issued a notice of funding opportunity. So as a result, in the state of Maine, we're facing a potential layoff of the federally funded staff, and Maine is not alone. This manufactured, in my mind, funding crisis is being inflicted on all of our states. For example, 12 people have already been laid off in Ohio, and that amounts to about a third of their staff in the State Historic Preservation Office. These offices have an integral role in the advancement of federal projects, and holding back the funds that Congress appropriated for these offices means delaying projects, including in the oil and gas sector. So I did contact your office about this last week. I'm expecting that you might have an update for me. Do you know the status of these funds?
We're waiting on the apportionment to come, but we're pushing hard on trying to get this out because it's, as you say, we have every incentive. Our incentives are in line with yours to get these dollars out the door.
So, I mean, the chair asked you a question earlier about the 2026 budget, and if we appropriate money that goes beyond what's in this skinny budget or what we see in the full budget, will you spend the money? You said it's the law. The Interior Bill, which is in the CR, contains a provision that requires that amounts appropriated to the Department of Interior, quote, shall be available for obligation and expenditure not later than 60 days after the date of enactment of the act. And as you said, that's the law. OMB is not apportioned the funding. You just said that. But we are past the 68-day deadline, and I just want to know the role that you're taking. Are you pushing the OMB to appropriate your department's funding?
Well, I didn't bring a stack of communication that's gone back and forth, but I would say that would represent that, yeah, we're pushing.
Okay, pushing is good. So just from my perspective, if you don't get this funding, then that is impoundment. It is breaking the law. And I think perhaps on both sides of the aisle, we're feeling very frustrated. This administration is not expeditiously appropriating what we funded. I guess I would just have to say, and I mentioned to you earlier, there's a lot of frustration here, and Congress has the power of the purse. We meet in this committee, and we do an incredible amount of work, negotiating back and forth on both sides of the aisle to arrive at these numbers and to figure out what should be done. And to have this administration just wantonly disregard what we have done and to worry about having to do that in the next 2026 budget, I would ask, why do committees meet? Why do we do the work that we're doing if, in fact, we can't count on the OMB to do what is being done? And I know there are layers here, and I really appreciate saying that you've got a stack of communications because I fully believe you're doing that, and I know you have a lot of executive experience. So I am just encouraging you to put full force of pressure on it, to not break the law, and to do what's required to do. Thank you.
Will do. And as a governor, I understand the importance of the state historical preservation offices and the tribal historical preservation offices. So we're aligned in getting appropriated money to people so they can do their jobs.
Great. great. We will look forward to seeing that continue to happen. I'll yield back there, and I can ask my next question later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I've congratulated you yet, Mr. Secretary, so belated congratulations. Be careful what you ask for, right?
I don't think I asked for this, but but I did say yes. So
okay, fair enough.
Little did you know.
Can you tell me where you're at in terms of, I'm intrigued by the idea of consolidating federal wildland fire responsibilities. Can you tell me, will Boise still be kind of the operational center of firefighting under this? And briefly, just where we at on that consolidation? I think I got the impression your consolidation is going to be ready to go this fire season, which is, I don't know, depending on where you are, might be here already, but here shortly.
You know, the fire season's here already, and been working closely with specifically with Brooke Rollins and USDA on this plan. And I think that the key here is building off the successes we have. You know, the Idaho, where the joint operation right now is the closest thing we have to coordination, but we still end up in situations that are where resource allocation is affecting our ability to fight fires. I had personal experience of this last October. We had a wildland fire in North Dakota. It was happening not completely overlap, but not long after the LA fires at 124,000 acres. That's bigger than all the LA fires. No one ever heard about it. We lost 2 lives. We had a couple of ranchers trying to protect livestock that got caught in the raging speed of a overland prairie wildfire. Very tragic. We knew that it was a high fire risk season. We had our state resources, including our National Guard on call, in position, ready to go. Black Hawk helicopters with the ability to do drop buckets out trying to protect folks. This started on middle of the night on a Friday night, and Saturday morning at 6 a.m., myself and the state of North Dakota was calling for federal air support, and they arrived on Tuesday. We'd been called on Saturday, called on Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, Monday afternoon, Tuesday. That entire time, I'm fully understand, because now Senator Tim Sheehy, who is running a contract business, flying aircraft, had aircraft sitting on the ground in Montana, a short distance away, and there was never a decision made to distribute aircraft for this thing. And where it was, the adjacency of the fire to Lake Sakakawea, the fact that it was in these tough Badlands canyons that you couldn't get out with fire crews. They came in with their scoopers, they're loading up a plane in 11 seconds, skimming along the surface, 6 tons of water, and they had this fire out in 4 hours. And so it was a dramatic example of how a little better coordination of releasing resources and making decisions could get us there. And I think that so we're moving ahead with that, and I would expect that you'll hear from ahead of any legislation. You'll hear a joint announcement from Brooke Rollins and myself soon about how we're trying to implement greater coordination in this fire season.
Great. And we'll be getting back with you in terms of who's the point in your office just for monitoring that sort of stuff, but it sounds like you've got a good feel for it.
Well, we got to start. I mean, we given that this is moving one responsibility from a department to another, and you're in a position here, oversee with both, we'd want to work closely with this committee to make sure that we get all of the, the appropriations, everything figured out. But we think this is one of these things where if we can make better decisions faster, and we can save money with better systems on decision making using all the current tools. I know that former Secretary and Congressman Zinke is coming from Montana, also knows that there is tools that were available to him as a Navy SEAL 20 years ago that we're not using to protect firefighters on the ground right now. So we've got to make sure we equipped everybody with the right tools and give them the right command structure, and then put more firefighters on the front line and less people trying to make manual decisions about where to allocate resources.
I appreciate that. Now, I want to move the focus to personnel, or that's an old term, HR, whatever the new term is. There are a few areas that affect operations, and I think we touched. When you talk about getting an appraisal for any kind of federal land, that means you've killed the idea. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I'm just saying, well, we've only got, this many certified appraisers, and 3 of them are on death's door, and the 2 that are left are scheduled until, sometime in the next century or something like that. And so that's an issue that has been around for a long time. I bring that up. Certified minerals examiners, same thing. And then I also bring it up in the most recent stuff, where when you look at the mission of Interior, especially in the West, where so much of the ground is yours, and you talk about just administering that in an everyday sense, whether it's, range people or real estate people or anything. So when the last round of cuts comes, at least in the parts that I pay attention to, your state and district offices were already significantly below whatever. Now, I'm not saying whatever is unassailable. It's like, listen, if there are positions being carried that can't be, justified, then quit carrying them. But when you put those cuts on top of a bunch of vacancies, which leads us into what they're getting paid and can they afford to live where they're, all that other sort of stuff. And I'll just say, I hope that becomes something that and we've mentioned it to secretaries long before you, and it's tough, and I get that, but I think this is an opportunity, and I think we've seen it so far, for a refocus on the mission of Interior nationwide, where it's like, hey, they're going to need a little more support than, oh yeah, them too. So I say that whether you're talking about Native issues or whatever, where it's like, I think this committee has always been, so you've got some support there in terms of going, you want us to operate efficiently, good. You want us to but we also need the ability to operate. And those are just a few of the areas where it's like, I don't know how you can sit there and hold somebody's feet to the fire when there's a whole bunch of empty desks.
Well, I got this sort of hits on across. You mentioned BLM is one of the key things where appraisals they're occurring, but the high level thing what we're trying to accomplish in terms of a strategic restructuring would be to get more people on the front lines. I mean, more rangers in the park, more biologists on the rangeland, more people doing appraisals on these whether mining or whether it's Southern Nevada Lands Act. Transfers, and I think that there's a big opportunity to do that as we get our hands on the layers. I mean, BLM, for example, they have field offices, they have district offices, they have regional offices, they have state offices, and then there's a federal office. And I don't know any, corporation today that's in any business, but even if you were in the timber management business or if you're in the raising business, you wouldn't have 5 layers between headquarters and the front lines. I mean, with today's systems, you might have 3, but you wouldn't have 5. So whatever we're doing to try to streamline, we're at the end of the day, we want to end up with more people, more minutes on mission, as we say, more people that are out there getting it done. And then in some cases, we just have to change the administrative rules. I mean, I was with you in Nevada last week. I guess it was Friday. We were there Friday afternoon, meeting with the governor and with Secretary Turner from HUD. And the Southern Nevada Lands Act has been around since Harry Reid was in office, and it's very structured process for how we move BLM land into other uses in Southern Nevada. And one of those uses is affordable housing. And so we were at a project. After our meeting with the roundtable with all the local, we went out to that 18 acres. In the administrative rules, it's being transferred to the city of Henderson for a 390 unit, $120 million affordable housing project at $100 an acre. I mean, this is a huge benefit for that project. And then Representative, I said, well, how fast can they get going? They said, well, we're waiting for the appraisal. And I said, it says in administrative rules, it's $100. It's not going to change. It's $100 an acre. They said, yes, but we're still required to do an appraisal. And I'm like, why are we required to do an appraisal? Well, because that's also in these rules. So then we have conflicting rules. And then I said, well, how long does the appraisal take? They said, well, it could take longer than 6 months, but that's a problem because if it's longer than 6 months, then it's outdated and we have to start over again. It trips this continuous thing. And, you know, these are the things that, you know, coming from the private sector, I'm just like, I get motivated when I hear these things because I'm like, we just have to get rid of all of this. This creates more work for the people on the front lines and we get less things done. And in the end of the day, what we did in North Dakota, we cut, when I took office, we were having a huge revenue crisis because of the having a revenue drop. We had to cut $1.7 billion out of a $6 billion general fund in a little state like North Dakota, $1.7 billion in my first 4 months, you know, coming from the private sector. All the trains still ran on time. That's just 27% cut. And we did that. And part of it is we got rid of the things that were getting in the way of the team members doing the jobs that they wanted to do. People go into government because they want to make a difference. They don't go into government because they want to push paper and use 50-year-old IT systems. So anyway, there's a way to end up with more meaningful, purposeful, effective jobs and reduce costs because I've done it. I mean, I know that's true, but in this case, you're spot on, Representative, in terms of the around the appraisals and around the need for making sure. And I would say you mentioned, you know, Winnemucca, Elko, you know, all these communities where it's hard to staff. Those guys are the lifeblood of our agencies, the people that are working in these remote areas, and we need more of them. And we need, you know, frankly, we need less people in Washington D.C. The people in Washington D.C. When I walked into that building that holds 4,000 people, there was nobody there. I mean, so it's like you know, they're all working remotely, but they weren't working remotely from Elko, right? And so it's like we want to get people out, you know, out on the ground doing the job that serves, you know, the timber industry, the grazing industry, the mining industry, the recreation industry, you know, the wildlife, outdoors, fish and game industries. I mean, outdoor recreation is a $1.2 trillion industry. We're serving them too. So there's big opportunity for us to cut overhead and get more people on the ground.
Thank you, sir. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Harder.
Thank you so much, Secretary, for being here. I want to use my time today to discuss the West's wildfire crisis and how hopefully we can work together to support our wildland firefighters, I know near and dear to your heart, and invest in the resources we need to confront and deal with these mega fires head on. As you know, wildland firefighters risk their lives to keep our communities safe. But as these fires have become larger, more intense, and more frequent, we're asking more and more of these men and women than ever before. They face extreme conditions, breathing in toxic smoke, enduring temperatures as high as 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and often working 18-hour shifts for weeks on end. When tragedy strikes and a firefighter is injured, we owe it to them and their families to provide full support. But right now, only the U.S. Forest Service has a formal casualty assistance program. That means thousands of firefighters under the Department of Interior still don't have access to those same benefits. My bill to fix this, that was included in the bipartisan Fix Our Forest Act, would make sure that all Department of the Interior federal firefighters and their families have access to the support they've earned. Secretary Burgum, do you support establishing a Department of Interior casualty assistance program so every federal wildland firefighter is protected if tragedy strikes?
Well, Representative, I would say with, you know, my experience as governor, I had a commitment that I was never going to commit to support a bill that I hadn't read. And so I won't go that far, but I would say that from an intention standpoint of what you're trying to accomplish, I fully support from an intention. And there's two pragmatic. One is we do have a moral responsibility to people that are first responders, law enforcement that are, you know, taking risks, the people that are running towards danger instead of away from it. We've got a real responsibility to support them. And of course, across Interior, we've got firefighting and law enforcement. We have firefighting across BIA. We've got it in national parks. We've got it in BLM. We've got some even in our wildlife refuges. I mean, so we've got that. And as we spoke earlier, then we're, you know, it's under, in this budget, it's also combining under a unified command with the Forest Service. when we're all unified under one command and you've got one group of firefighters that have higher benefits than others, it accelerates this transfer like we've seen in law enforcement, which is, hey, I love law enforcement, but I'm going to go to work for the law enforcement agency that has the best protections for my family, the best pay structure. We have implemented a base pay increase for firefighters since I've been in office already this spring because we were underpaying. And then, of course, we've got to make sure that we've got our systems and policies set up for the people that are, so that we're not treating people as seasonal that come back and work for us every single year as a firefighter. I mean, they're not a temporary. They come back year after year. They do take part of the season off, but then they work their tail off, the other months, and those fire seasons are getting longer. So I absolutely agree with the direction that you're going, and I appreciate that you're championing the important and dangerous work that these wildland firefighters are doing.
Thank you. Supporting our wildland firefighters is, I think, extremely bipartisan, something we can all agree on, and thank you for your leadership and the work that you've done. It's also, as you said, critical for recruitment because we know we need more of these wildland firefighters. One more issue that I think we can find common ground on is that when fires break on federal land, it's often our local fire departments that are the first to respond. They act quickly, decisively, saving lives, protecting property. But when it comes time for reimbursement, those same departments can sometimes face years of bureaucratic delays from federal agencies like the Department of the Interior and Fish and Wildlife. It's unacceptable, and it leaves communities without the resources that they need to respond to the next fire, especially some of these small volunteer departments where it may be years of their budget that's wrapped up in this bureaucratic process where they're waiting time. So I've introduced the Fire Department Repayment Act, which streamlines repayment procedures, cuts red tape for local fire departments. It passed the House last Congress and is also included in the Fix Our Forest Act. Do you support that bill, or at least that concept, to ensure that local fire departments have the resources that they need and they don't have to wait years and years on end to actually get repaid for the work that they did to keep our communities safe?
Well, yes, Representative, with the same caveat of not having read the bill, but with the concept, I've lived this with small communities in western North Dakota. Much of western North Dakota falls under the U.S. National Grasslands, which of course is part of USDA, and I could just start naming off communities that are that were fighting fires, last year that I'm sure haven't been paid yet. This is something we hear about at the state level all the time, and you're exactly right. Those small communities are almost all volunteer, and these fires can completely exhaust their resources.
Yeah, I've heard reimbursement from our state for fighting a state fire can be weeks or months. For the federal government, it can be years and years and years for them to ever actually get the payment that they're owed. We have to fix this. Would love to work with you to make that happen and get this bill signed into law to support our local fire departments. So thank you for that, and look forward to working together in the future. And I yield back.
Mr. Elsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I read your resume, and it's really spectacular. We've never met before, but from your time as governor, starting in 2016, you did some remarkable things. You've both supported fossil fuels, but you've also supported carbon neutral, which generated $25 billion in private sector investment in your state alone. So anybody who's protesting your pro-fossil fuel stance needs to look at your background and understand that it's far more nuanced and more well-rounded than that. You're also a China hawk, which I greatly appreciate, and the need to mine and process critical minerals in the United States determines whether or not the Chinese surpass us in many sectors, including military, or not. And so I'm glad that you're in charge of the energy czar as well as mining czar. And of course, I want to thank you for sending the National Guard from North Dakota down to the warm weathers of Texas to help us reinforce the border. But one of the things that we've seen in this committee is when we have tribal days, and this year we had a record number of tribes come because Chairman Simpson has made it such a big priority. They have all been worried about cuts to Interior and whether or not it's going to affect them or not based on our treaty obligations, which is the law to them. The thing that affects me most in my questions about cuts is historically is their law enforcement capability based on cultural issues, being able to hire folks, but also monetary issues, being able to afford people that they train to come stick around instead of going to other law enforcement agency, but as well as the massive amounts of land that they have to cover. They have no air cover, and I'm a naval aviator, and so my question to you is this: how are we going to help them beat the 0.6 and get to where they need to be with 2.4 per thousand? But also, is there a way that we can get some of our retired aircraft to them to help them in both emergency response as well as law enforcement?
Well, Representative, law enforcement in country is a grave concern that I have, and during my time as governor, I was well aware of this issue, and it's compounding because I think that the bad guys know that we've got gaps in law enforcement on tribal lands, and so as we saw a period of time when we had all the economics of human trafficking, drug trafficking, and fentanyl in our country, one of the places that was easier for organized crime organizations to work and operate was in tribal areas. We conducted a joint effort in North Dakota across 3 of our 5 tribes with the federal government, FBI, State of North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the State Highway Patrol, local tribal police. A couple of years ago, we arrested 55 people in one day across 3 tribes. They were all 55 affiliated with a gang out of Detroit that was connected to a cartel in Mexico, and it ties back to not only the drug trafficking, but this horrible issue of there's over 6,000 unsolved cases for missing and murdered Indigenous persons, most of those persons being Indigenous women, and we had our Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee a couple weeks ago here. There's 12 regions, 2 representatives from each. We held that literally in my office, moved everything out, brought everybody in. We're set up in there, and on all 12 regions, everybody brought up law enforcement as an issue. Ahead of that meeting, we had the family of Emily Pike come in, and this case in Arizona that is not well understood, or I think I've always said if you have a co-ed that goes missing at spring break, it's going to be a 10-part Netflix series, and we have 6,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women, and you don't even know about it. Emily Pike is one that is as tragic as it becomes because she was ended up after having been assaulted. Law enforcement had identified an assailant. He was released after 3 days. She was considered the victim. She was, 13 or 14 years old, sent to a foster home, ran away from the foster home. The foster home didn't tell her parents till she'd been reported her missing 5 days later. And then, search begins, as it often does, and then ends tragically, and they found her dismembered in garbage bags, along the side of a road, as she must have been trying to make her way back from the foster home 80 miles back to the reservation where her family was. And so it doesn't get more tragic, but we brought Cash Patel over to Interior. He sat with me with the Emily Pike family, and and then he stayed and met with the Secretary's Committee, and I was told by virtually every tribal leader there that was the first time that they had a meeting with the head of the FBI. He has dedicated 60 FBI already. He's announced that 60 FBI personnel are going to be deployed on Indian country cases. I talked to him yesterday at the White House, and he said that he hopes that he can get more resources placed again it. So this isn't just about, yes, we need BIA law enforcement, we need upgraded retention facilities, we need a bunch of things on the local level, but it is a federal responsibility. This is, again, as a governor, I can tell you, very frustrating when these things would happen, that we could not legally, in many cases, deploy state resources to help the tribes. We did. We volunteered. We said we'll be out. We'll help on searches, all of that. But from a jurisdictional standpoint, this is federal ground and federal law enforcement, and we got to bring all federal law enforcement. And I would say, into your acknowledgement on the border and down in your state, but 41% of the southwestern border is interior land. 41%. And so, so this touches law enforcement across not just, BIA, BLM, national parks, touches everybody. And so law enforcement is something we're spending a lot of time focused on right now.
Thank you. And I'd just like to ask, let's get them some air support. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, and thank you for your service as well. But a great idea on the air support, because in these big areas, whether it's unmanned or manned, this can be super helpful tools, and we've got the technology to deploy in these large areas. We need to do it.
Thank you. And just to follow, if I could, on that, with these, we held some hearings on murdered and missing Indigenous peoples, and the challenge we have is after listening to all the testimony, we had the FBI come in and give us testimony from the agents and stuff. Some of the problems we found is that if you have a reservation the size of Connecticut and you got 2 officers on patrol, you get a domestic violence call, it's 2 hours later before you can get there, it's over. So we've got to do something about that, and that's what we're trying to address. But the biggest issue is jurisdictional issues between the state, the feds, the local law enforcement. Somehow we got to resolve. If you ever read a chapter on Indian rights and so forth, when you get to law enforcement, it is crazy, because it is different if you are an Indian on a reservation or if you're an Indian off a reservation, or if you are a non-tribal member that's an Indian on that reservation. And it becomes a joke trying to figure it out. Anyway, Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the discussion on our tribal sisters who have suffered. Secretary Burgum, I had a kick off the defense meeting, but I did read your testimony. It's good to see you as being from family from Oaks, North Dakota, spending time in Williston and Sidney, Montana. I know where the trains run on time and where they change the time in Mandan. Through no fault of your own, we're working with a great disadvantage here because we're trying to discuss the budget without any details. You're still trying to put it together. We did get a skinny budget, and then it has a 30.5% cut to the Department of Interior, which, I think, speaking for myself, being a former chair with other former chairs sitting here, we think deserves a whole lot more money for the work and the job that we have to do. So to see a cut is really disappointing for us. We're trying to do things, many of the things that we talked about here, schools, law enforcement, clean water, having the personnel out there to work locally. So right now you're also finalizing plans to lay off thousands of employees through the department. We're still trying to figure out what DOJ did do, didn't do, can do, cannot do. So you've got a lot on your plate trying to figure out what we do to keep public employees where they need to be, providing the services that our constituents are demanding from us. Cutting park operations, you know well, you mentioned it, fewer park rangers to keep our visitors safe, to do the education that we need to do with the next generation about how important our natural resources are. And then there's just less maintenance of trails and national landmarks and that people go to visit the great state of North Dakota. I'll throw South Dakota in there just to keep everything good in the 5-state area, just to see what's happening. And it's those personal connections. One of the things that I found really alarming is the 39% cut to the U.S. Geological Survey. That's the scientific backbone of your department, the flow of water that sustains life, water that sustains our economy, whether it's crops. And then water, as we well know, with what happened in Fargo and Moorhead, is still fresh in everybody's mind if you're around there, what happens when there's floods. So I hope, Mr. Chair, that as we have a little more money coming our way, that we don't forget the U.S. Geological Survey. Well, they propose, we dispose. And so this is perfect. Leads into what Chairman Cole was saying about making sure that there's money for historic preservation. So the cuts of $900 million from tribal nations, public safety, school infrastructure, you heard it. I just have to reiterate, we're very, very concerned about that. So as I said, we haven't seen much of your budget. So let me turn to something that isn't budgetary, which I normally don't do in this committee. I'm going to have my staff hand you a letter. This letter was sent on April 8th by me and other members of the Minnesota delegation. It is, and I can imagine how many letters you have, and maybe this one wasn't at the tip top of the first pile that was on your desk. The Mississippi National River Recreation Area was established by Congress in 1988 as a partnership park. MNRA, as it's called, and the Park Service, they work with 25 local governments, state and tribal nations, and other partner organizations to conserve, interpret, and manage 72-mile stretch of America's greatest river, the Mississippi River, also a working river. It incorporates local parks like the Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary, named after my friend and predecessor who sponsored the MNRA organization. Earlier this year, Elon Musk directed GSA to cancel the leases for the park's operational headquarters in its only visitor center, located in the lobby of the Science Museum of Minnesota. Roughly 230,000 visitors last year learned about the biology, the history, and the culture of the Mississippi River from park rangers through interactive exhibits, including, and I threw a couple of photos in there, like a flying eagle, and how to tie off a barge, something I didn't learn how to do growing up in South St. Paul on the Mississippi River, but I can tell you it's hard work from trying to do it at the Interpretive Center. MNRA is the only Park Service unit with the mission of interpreting the Mississippi River, our nation's river that everybody knows how to spell in this country, and people all around the world know how to spell it. The great river's ecological and economic importance to our nation. But here's the other thing. Not only do a lot of urban visitors visit that park, but people come from all over the 5-state area, as you know, to go to that history center. That's where park rangers are telling them about grass lanes, Theodore Roosevelt National Park, what's going on in Michigan, in the Great Lakes area. So it is a huge bang for the National Park Service's buck to be in the Science Museum. So we understand that the MNRA leases are no longer on DOJ's list, but we haven't received any official response to my letter yet. So can we talk about this some more? Can we meet with other members on this before any further decisions are made about MNRA's future and losing that one interpretive center in the Twin Cities? In the, because it's the Dakotas, it's Iowa, it's our cousins from Canada who come down there, all in there being exposed to the Park Service. I love MNRA, but I love the Park Service even more. So can we work with your office on this?
Well, yes, we can. And your information matches mine, which is that these 2 leases that you're discussing in the letter are off the list. And so I'm anticipating that we'll have communication confirming that with you.
We've tried to also work both in the St. Croix Scenic River and on the Mississippi River to try to get not grandiose monuments to anybody, but to have more Park Service interpretation and that. And we also need to find a better lease space for MNRA and that's more on the river. The last thing I would add is when we were talking about law enforcement picking things up, I just, for the record, want to say how grateful I am to the St. Croix Sheriff's Department for the work that they do on the St. Croix River, because between us and Wisconsin, there's no other law enforcement first response out there for boaters on the scenic river. So we try to be a good partner. We look forward to being an even better partner with you in the future.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would say when our kids were younger, our favorite camping spot in Minnesota was the headwaters of the Mississippi up at Itasca, beautiful place. And when they were younger, they'd been to the Science Museum, so I've been there with them as well. And I've also boated in the recreation area. I've got a sister and a nephew that live in the Twin Cities, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think the larger principle for this committee, when we're saying we need more money for law enforcement, need more money for school construction, that one thing we maybe need less money for is federal office space. I mean, we have got so much office space in this country, and in some cases we need it. Some places it's a prime location, like in this case in the middle of the Science Museum, but we've got and particularly with the capability for people to effectively work remotely, or if we want to get more people out on the front lines, more people on a patrol boat, less people sitting in an office. We have to look at that balance, and I think that it's same for every state. I saw this in North Dakota. I mean, a little state like North Dakota, when I came there, I said, how much space do we have? Nobody knew. It wasn't on a balance sheet. Turns out we had 24 million square feet of space in little old North Dakota. And I'm like, do we need that much? No. Well, if you can get rid of, consolidate leases, renegotiate leases, do things like that. And in many cases, the federal government right now, with the collapse in demand for commercial space coming out of COVID, the fact that if things were on that list, it didn't mean that we were getting rid of it. It meant, is there an opportunity to renegotiate a list? When we do renegotiate a lease, when we do that, that frees up the dollars to spend on the stuff that all of us want to do. So it is smart for every department to be taking a look at their cost of space, because that's probably an area where we can save without affecting services to our citizens.
It's Minneapolis, St. Paul, but I'm from St. Paul, and we're here to help you find space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. This feels really up close and personal, sitting on the same side of the table as you. As the Secretary of Interior, you manage a lot of the land in my state. Utah's a majority public land, and you manage more land than any other entity in the state.
And you may have more big national parks in your district than anybody I've met, too.
I think I do, and we're proud of them. But you and I don't have any choice but to work together. I know you know our governor really well. I know you know these issues, but everything I'm going to ask you today is going to come down to some version of the same question. Will you work with us to make sure that the way the Department of Interior manages the resources in Utah is good for Utahns? A lot of times we get drowned out in big national conversations about what happens to the resources in our state. So please work with us on managing resources in Utah. So, water. Utah uses less water per capita today than it did 20 years ago, even while we've been one of the fastest growing states in the country for that entire time. Are you confident that the department's budget will continue to help states like Utah lead out on conservation?
Well, first thing I do want to say is, yes, you've got a commitment because part of our job and our mission at Interior relates to the lands, and so then states like Nevada, states like Idaho, states like Utah, Alaska that have got such a high proportion. I mean, part of what everybody on my team knows is we've got to be working more closely with these states. I mean, that's just essential for us to do it, because part of the way that we're going to navigate through not only the protecting and preserving these, great resources, but also to make sure that we're not doing both overreach or overlap, because that's part of where the cost comes in, is when we're doing something that at U.S. Fish and Wildlife that Utah's Fish and Wildlife is already doing. Yeah. If we're doing, go down the line, but as a governor, everything that I've got, the governor of all these states also has. And I know that because I was on the other side of the overreach for 8 years. And so that overreach and then the overlap is sometimes we've got two agencies coming at Utah. I mean, we might have BLM, Forest Service, coming at the same rancher sometimes, with two different sets of rules. That's this overlap. So when we take a look at overlap and overreach, there's big opportunities for efficiencies and better results for states and for citizens and landowners and recreators and hunters and fishermen. So yeah, it is central to what we're trying to accomplish, is what you just asked for. So we're completely aligned on that.
Thank you. That is really good to hear. Continuing on water.
Can I say one thing on water, though? First of all, the fact that Utah uses less water and has had the incredible population growth that you've had is remarkable. And I think when we're heading into this really important discussion, I'm sure this committee knows better than anybody in Capitol Hill that 2026 is the year that all of the compacts have got to be finished by on the Colorado River. So I got 14 senators and lots of representatives and 7 governors, calling me since the day I got in office. I mean, this is a big, big issue. And certainly as we look at that, I mean, one of the inspirational models is that a place like Utah can have big population growth and actually use less water. I mean, that's the hope for all of us with the water challenges we have in the West. So way to go, Utah, in terms of innovation on conservation of water.
Thank you. We're really proud of that, so I appreciate you recognizing it. And one of the things that's happened as we've been doing that is state and local leaders in Utah have implemented a comprehensive water conservation plan and invested serious money and dedicated staff and resources to addressing the challenges of rapid population growth. And when we've worked with the federal government, the funding for water conservation disproportionately goes to other states. And so will you work with us to prioritize funding for shovel-ready projects in Utah where we are growing and we're implementing a comprehensive plan? We're doing all the things that you would want us to be doing as a state.
Yes, and I, of course, have to look at the, I can't commit to projects just like I can't commit to bills I haven't read, but it's exciting that there's more good stuff on deck. And of course, I'm very excited that Andrea Travnik, who has worked in Interior prior and who has a PhD that she earned in part while working at inside of a national park, and is also we recruited her back to North Dakota, and we created a new position for her statewide. She was the director of water resources statewide, managing billions of dollars of projects. Great experience with all the international challenges we've got with Canada. Red River flows north. The Souris River comes out of Canada, goes back into Canada. And then the Missouri River is different than the Colorado, but we're familiar with those upstream, downstream things. She was at the center of all that the last 4 years, and now she is going through the Senate process to be the head of water and science, and so she's going to be a key partner in driving this. I mean, we've got really one of the most qualified people to help lead this discussion, somebody from the West who understands both the upstream and the downstream concerns, and she's going to do a fantastic job on helping to mediate through the 7 states to get us to a good spot.
Good. As a fellow Westerner and as a fellow water nerd, I look forward to working with her.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure you get you two connected. She would appreciate that title.
All right. My local elected officials are always concerned with federal land management because of the high percentage of federal land we have in the state, second only to Mr. Amadei's state. My counties and cities have to work with federal agencies to maintain roads, fight fires, write long-term plans, plan power ingress and egress to their cities. What is your plan as the secretary to strengthen those partnerships with the local elected officials who represent the people who live just completely interconnected with public land?
Well, I think we have to build, we've got, as I said, local offices for all these different bureaus within. And part of what we're trying to do is bring a focus back to making sure we've got the state relationships there. And then obviously, as Representative Amadei has already seen, I mean, we're not shy about calling up a governor and saying, hey, get all your people in a room and we're coming out and we want to listen to everybody. And as we did, I mean, we had a great roundtable. I think it was close to 90 minutes of hearing from all the people that from across the state of Nevada, and so I expect you'll see more of us doing more of that. But for me, the governors is also a key place to start. I had an opportunity to be vice chair and chair of Western Governors. That's a bipartisan group. It is, I think, the most effective bipartisan group in the country. And what binds all the Western governors together are the issues that this committee talks about. It's water, it's tribes, it's infrastructure, it's growth, it's the interaction with federal lands. And so there wasn't a meeting I went to with the Western governors, and there wasn't anything that the staff of Western governors worked on that isn't almost identical to this, because we had wildfire on our agenda every year for the 8 years that I was part of that organization. We had water on our agenda every year for all the 8 years. And so these working across multi-state key, and I think for us, because I've got existing relationships with all the governors, that's one of the places we're going to start. And you have great leadership in Utah. I think Spencer Cox is one of the best.
I do think your relationships with the governors are going to be invaluable in this job. I'm excited to have you.
And not that Greg Gianforte and Brad Little and Sheriff Joe, I mean, they're all great out there in the West. I don't want to pick favorites. We love all of our children out there, but we're fortunate to have good, strong leaders across the West.
Sure. None of us have favorites, but I'm glad our governor's your favorite. And the state and the counties in Utah have invested a lot of time and money into writing comprehensive resource management plans so that we can be good partners between the federal government, state and local governments. And I just hope that your departments will prioritize working with them and treat it as an actual partnership and not a box-checking exercise. And it sounds like you're already prepared to do that.
Well, we have to, and I think one of the things that, for having been on the receiving end of some of those RMPs at the state level, is that that didn't happen. I mean, there was, and even as recently as me taking this job when I first got in, I mean, I heard from multiple Western governors that said in the tail end of the last administration, you know, they were basically in a thing, you know, quick sign this RMP before you leave office, and you know, and then you read the fine print. But if they will give you concessions if you sign it, but then if they signed it, then they would have not been allowed to challenge it through any process going forward. I'm like, what's that all about? I mean, it's like, you know, either we agree or we don't agree. It's not like let's do coercion at the end of a term to try to get states to sign on, and 2 states signed on and about 6 or 8 didn't on, you know, one of those RMPs. But that's not the way you do this. You got to have the local input. You got to have support, and in many cases, the management should be happening at a local level. I mean, it's not. It's again, it's this thing that, you know, you want to save money in Interior. I mean, then delegate some of this power to these great state agencies that are already out there that have all the relationships. We don't need to be doing the same thing the states are doing.
This is music to my ears. Thank you.
And by the way, you know, we have the head of Fish and Game in Wyoming, Brian Nesvik, is coming on board. He's making his way through the process. So again, part of my commitment to implement this is getting people from Western states to actually serve as the heads of these bureaus inside of Interior, because they like me, were on the receiving end of some of this stuff, and they're going to know exactly how to identify the overlap and the overreach and help us streamline.
I feel like I'm probably abusing my time at this point, so I'll hurry through 2 questions. Lease sales. The last administration blatantly ignored mandates to do lease sales. Will you work with us on making sure we're producing energy?
Yes. Blatantly ignored is actually is more polite than it needs to be. They were blatantly breaking the law. North Dakota was one of the states that sued the federal government, and we won because it was the first administration since Harry Truman that didn't hold the legally required lease sales every quarter. They held up 735 lease sales. All of that is revenue to the American people that was being held up. You know, some of that started, and 4 years later, some of it was still in court. We're still battling over that. But I mean, no, we will follow the law. We're going to hold lease sales, and we'll do it as required.
Thank you. Last thing, wild horses. It's a regional problem. It's one that Utah has been leading out on for a long time. It's one that this committee's worked really well together on. I'm sad that Ms. McCollum's gone, because I'm going to give her a shout out for being really good about working with us on wild horses, but the problem just keeps growing and growing. Will you work with us on finding long-term solutions to this problem that just never seems to get solved and never seems to go away? I don't need a solution right now. I'm just asking for a commitment to keep working on this moving forward.
Yes, you can have that guarantee, because you know, unconstrained wild horses and burros are causing more damage to the grasslands than any other species, and we have to have a solution. So that they're causing damage, and we're spending over $100 million trying to manage it, and we're not being effective in how we're managing.
I'm glad to know you're up to speed on the issue.
Yep.
Hopefully we can find some solutions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will finally yield back. Maybe not. He's not listening. I can keep filibustering.
Mr. Zinke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for stepping up to the plate again, Mr. Secretary. John Wesley Powell, I think, said it best. The expansion of the West depends on water. That's why in Montana, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. So, Mr. Secretary, I missed the beginning of the hearing. I apologize, but you do have the authority required to execute land changes and divesting of tracts of land to alleviate the checkerboard system and some of the problems out west.
Yes, and we talked about this a little earlier, but we've got some tools, and if we find, as we get further into this, that we need more authorities, I've committed to work with this committee to make sure that we can optimize land transfers with states or tribes as necessary.
And the president gave you an executive order to make sure that you and Secretary of Ag do just that. Is that correct?
Well, the executive order was with HUD versus Ag. Certainly, we've got a good working relationship with Brooke Rollins, but on the executive order was specifically to try to address the issue of housing, and with that, we did a study similar to the great example we have on the Southern Nevada Lands Act, where there was a mechanism that's already in place. But taking a look, and across I mentioned at the beginning, 480 million acres just in Interior. There's another 200 million acres in Forest Service, which we haven't examined. But if you take a look at that, a lot of that is in remote places. Only about 150,000 acres of that federal land is within 3 miles of a city, and that would be the most likely eligible piece. And so there is a teeny, less than 1% of that public land that, like the Southern Nevada Lands Act, that could help alleviate it, but it could be a real factor because land costs in places, like Nevada, like Utah, and others where we've got fast-growing metros are landlocked. But it's not a solution for affordable housing in all 50 states because, as I said, like in the eastern part of the U.S., we have really no federal land to help with affordable housing. Out west, it's a part of the solution.
And it seems like you and the Trump administration are committed to helping those communities, municipalities that are surrounded by federal lands to make sure you address housing, public infrastructure needs. Is that what I'm hearing? You're committed to do that?
Well, we are, and part of that is also making sure that in the case of Southern Nevada, there's a specific law that's been passed that we have to follow, but in other places where we can do it, we want to try to find that right mix of that multiple use thing of whether it's for housing, whether it's for give back to a state, to a tribe, whether it's for creating local park access activities. But yeah, it's using the land in a way that achieves the missions that we're against, and I think we can absolutely do that. It's just different. The big landlocked states are in a different world than a state that might have we have some states that have 0.3, 0.5% federal land. I mean, this is a conversation they've never had or never thought about. But if you've got 60, 70, 80% federal land, man, some of the people you're on this committee because of that reason. It's probably why you signed up for this, because it's such an issue.
And my colleague from Utah and Nevada on my right and left, can I have your commitment that you prioritize Utah and Nevada in your pursuit? Because it seems like a lot of the tension is just that. Can I have your commitment that you'll prioritize their needs in those local?
Absolutely, but I'd like to include Alaska and Idaho on there too, because those are the other ones on the top thing. And Wyoming is 40+%. They're coming down the list, but yeah, we've got some challenges, and the West is growing fast. I mean, it's growing fast, and we don't want to be. I mean, we were in that in Southern Nevada. The median price of a home in Nevada is $480,000 right now. Part of that's because you can't find a plot of land to build a house on anymore.
Well, in Montana, we are saying the first 2 years of Yellowstone was filmed in Utah. So please visit Utah. Also, Mr. Secretary, how important is it for tribal consultation as you go through these land exchanges? Because there's areas that with the Paiutes, you have the Utes, you have a number of tribes. How important is it to go through the tribal consultation as you look at these properties?
Well, I think it's critical because it's generally in the law, but then if you don't do that, then you end up in the courts, and then nothing gets transferred anyway. I mean, so that's the part of doing it right and doing it well up front is you can actually speed up the process. That's my experience from North Dakota on that. But that's I think it's something that Interior's committed to across all of our agencies, and it's not just the check a box. It's like you can end up with better solutions. And, but I'm also committed to consulting with local officials. I mean, the counties, the ranchers. I mean, every the people that live there. I mean, this is like get input from the people that live there. That matters.
And the process when you do a land exchange or transfer of land, you do look at the communities. You talk to the state to make sure there's concurrence, or at least you're aware of it. Then you look at the tribal consultation, and then I assume you look at the land itself, whether you're going to transfer surface, subsurface. You look at the water. That process. Can you, briefly, could you kind of explain where your process is and how you approach it?
Well, again, understand that I'm just over 100 days into my term here, but the best example I have is the one I shared earlier with Utah, where we successfully transferred, state and federal land, almost 200,000 acres going each way, and all the mechanisms were in place, to make that happen. I think that in the case of a state, you might consider transferring subsurface as well of it, but if it was going to be for any non-public use, I think it would be in the interest of the public from a financial standpoint to retain the minerals underneath that, because as we know today, there's opportunities for recognizing the value from that even while retaining it. So I think we'd want to make sure that we're looking carefully at those opportunities.
And lastly, I just want to say, if there's anything that we can do in Congress, please, we're anxious to work with you, on it. There's a lot of problems out west. A lot of the anger on the west has been mismanagement. I kind of give the example of if you have a hotel, you don't like the management, don't sell the hotel, but do management. Yep. So it seems like you're committed to look at the management side of it and make sure we undo some of the anger and hostility. Particularly out west, where people live in communities, they see great opportunity to have a quality of life by using the resources, but they seem to be locked out. They're locked out on the basic mining, on basic logging, on basic grazing, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for your service, and we look forward to working with you.
Well, and I would add to that list on hunting and fishing, because I mentioned earlier this $1.2 trillion we are going through a review. We think there's an opportunity for us to expand hunting and fishing access on hundreds and hundreds of parcels of federal land, both in BLM and across U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuges. Some of those, of course, restrict any kind of activity if they're a wildlife preserve, but there are other places where we can open more things for hunting and fishing, and I think that's great for state economies. It's great for local economies. I mean, it's a big business, and it's one of the multiple uses of public land, and we want to make sure that we're being smart about getting as much land back and available for hunting and fishing and every form of recreation that we can.
And Mr. Chair, for the record, I do recognize that North Dakota has better bird hunting than Montana. With that, I yield.
Oh, that's kind of like sucking up.
Yeah.
It's called a Codell.
Mr. Secretary, do you have
something I've never heard from South Dakota, by the way, but I appreciate that.
I didn't say South Dakota. I said North Dakota.
I know all the bird hunters in Idaho that used to hunt pheasant now go to North Dakota. Do you have a hard stop?
I do not.
I think there's a few more questions that most of us would like to ask. Let me ask a couple that I don't know if they're really questions. I guess they are. Skinny budget proposes a $1.2 billion cut to the National Park Service. Of that cut, $900 million is for the operations and maintenance of the 433 national park units across the country. To justify this reduction, the skinny budget says that you are going to shift the responsibility of managing some of these units to the states. Are we going to see a list of the parks that we are considered transferring to the states, and have we been in contact with any governors to see what they think about this?
First, let me make a clarification, which is there's, I think, zero intention of transferring any actual national parks. I mean, the 64 crown jewels that we have, there's zero thought about that. Okay. But what is little well known is that there is over 400 other locations that the National Park Service manages. These could be a birthplace of a president, like Theodore Roosevelt, right, in the middle of New York City. That's just a standalone building that also needs deferred maintenance and repair. It could be a battlefield site someplace. It could be, again, these are places that people would be shocked to find out are managed by the National Park Service, because they're not thought of as being part of the national parks. So I think the intention of the budget proposal is that Interior, working with you, would take a look at all of this and say, hey, are some of these things that are barely visited in remote locations that require all the overhead of federal government, you know, they want to do a project, they've got to go through all the federal contracting, you have to do all these things that they have to do, you know, puts a huge burden on these small, you know, places, many of them which have no ability even to charge admission. Right. I mean, so they're just cost centers is what they are. And and I know from that some of these existed in North Dakota, and as governor, we might have said, hey, if you want to you know, turn over the, you know, Knife River Indian Village's archaeological site to the state of North Dakota, it would fit super well inside of this. And we might then say, hey, we could also, you know, we could put some resources. This would be a great place. We could add a campground. We could add resources. It's close to another state park. We could do all this. So I think it's, again, a case by case basis, but this would be taking a look at that, you know, the tail end of the curve on things, because I think there has been an accumulation over time of, hey, can we get, you know, and whether it's a powerful person in Congress that says, hey, I want this thing to be a federal resource is not, for all the priorities we've talked about here, whether it's, you know, wildland or BIE or law enforcement, whatever. I mean, these cost centers are all cutting into the ability to do that, and I don't think I think they could be well served, sometimes better served from a budget standpoint, working with our states in partnership, as Representative Malloy was talking about. I mean, hey, like, let's work together and find out where's the best place for us to put some of it. So that would, if it's in the budget, it's going to have to start with a process that hasn't even been initiated yet to take a look at what would be possible and who would be interested, because we don't want to hand over resources to states that aren't going to take care of stuff. But some people might say, yeah, we'd love that.
Every year since I've been in Congress, there's always been proposals that to do something, some historic site or whatever, and they want the National Park Service to take care of it. And we just keep expanding what is under the control of the National Park Service, which is a concern. But the crown jewels are the crown jewels. And as we said in your office, let's not screw up our national parks, because that's something the American people will never forgive us for.
Yeah.
One other question.
Can I offer one other piece on this, which is related? I mean, we're building a presidential library. And I say we because the state of North Dakota was involved in providing part of the initial incentive, but it's a private sector opportunity. They're building a presidential library for Theodore Roosevelt at the entrance to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the only park that's named after an individual out of the 64 crown jewel parks. You know, that project has raised over $300 million of private capital, you know, through a brand new foundation. And we have other foundations that are raising all kinds of money. Theodore Roosevelt's birthplace was operated by a foundation until, as you just described, somewhere, you know, 30 years ago, someone says, oh, the Park Service should take it over. Well, when the Park Service took it over, that's when the deferred maintenance started to occur. That's when the underfunding started to occur. That's when people stopped holding events in that house that would have been revenue generating and doing all that. And, you know, those folks that are working there, they could be working for a foundation. I mean, I just was toured there a couple of weeks ago. There are people there that worked there for 30 years. They know everything you need to know. They're amazing. Great. Let them have them work for a foundation. And so it's not just states, but in the right cases where we've got, you know, Gettysburg battlefield, right in the middle of that battlefield, there's a carve out of private land, and that's a private foundation that built that $100 million visitor center. There's never going to be money from the federal government to build that, but now they've got an amazing thing. So if we want to tap into the private sector dollars, there's also an opportunity on the historic sites, not parks, but on the historic sites, to get people that care deeply about some of these places to get private sector partnerships going deeper than we have.
Okay. As you know, the 25 fiscal year budget was the last year of funding for the Legacy Restoration Fund, which was created by the Great American Outdoors Act that President Trump signed into law during his first term. The purpose of the fund is to address priority deferred maintenance needs in all public lands, but especially the National Park Service. The first 5 years of the Legacy Restoration Fund is a great investment in tackling this deferred maintenance, but there's still a $23 billion in deferred maintenance across the Park Service. Do you believe the continued investment in addressing these deferred maintenance needs at our parks and public lands should be a priority?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can tell you, just add one piece of color to support your committee's work. We did this in North Dakota across university buildings and state buildings and looked at the whole thing, and we said we got to do a comprehensive assessment of where we are on this deferred maintenance number, because I wanted to ground proof it and make sure it was a real number. But then, as you would know, and then it also, states have got deferred maintenance on roads, right? Yeah. And we have them on runways. I mean, so the whole idea across all the spending that occurs with a lot of federal money that flows down through states is it's not how much, but it's when. I mean, when we spend the money to fix a road when it's in stage 3 or a building it's at stage 3, because stage 4 is, stage 4 is it's over the hill and it's going to cost twice as much. Got to replace. Stage 5 is I got a hole in the roof that's leaking and the windows are out. But if you come in and you do that deferred maintenance by the tail end of stage 3, you can do it for pennies on the dollar versus when you get into roof replacement or runway replacement. We have to redo the whole thing. So we just come in we end up spending all this money and we spend it too late. We got to get on it. We got to get on these things sooner, and we get on them sooner, we'd be able to handle the whole list of projects. But if everything's already fallen into class 4 or class 5 deterioration, then you're just, man, we're wasting the taxpayers' money. So, but it's at some point to get there, you got to step up and say we're gonna solve the problem, and it's either, like I said, either it's private capital, state capital, or us spending money further upstream. But I'm all for deferred maintenance, because deferred maintenance eats you alive when you just keep adding and adding. When you keep adding cost without adding revenue, to these systems.
I've always been a fan of a saying that said, when ideas knock on your door, open the door, invite them in, and treat them royally, for you never know which one will be the king. That's kind of the way it is with the project proposal. There's a lot of proposed changes in here. I'm not going to ask you about wildland firefighting services, but I'm open to the idea. And open to the idea of should the Forest Service actually be in the Department of Interior. It's a question we've debated many times around here, but I want to know more about it, what the advantage is to doing the changes in wildfire fighting that's being proposed in this budget. We'll have this discussion as we move ahead with trying to put a bill together about what's the best way to do it, and are we trying to do it too rapidly before we're seeing how it's going to look down the road. So anyway, I appreciate that.
I would say that Chairman Westerman and Senator Sheehy, Westerman being the only forester that I'm aware of in the entire Congress, and Sheehy, who's come directly from a firefighting background, those two are both been working hard on this idea, and I would encourage the committee to speak with them if they haven't.
Okay. Jim Risch, the senator from Idaho, also has a degree in forestry.
Perfect.
Never practiced it, but he's good. He's a good guy. Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for giving us a little extra time. I know you've been here for quite a long time and appreciate that. And I appreciate the level of knowledge that you've shown about many of the issues and concerns that we've talked about. And I just want to reinforce one thing and then ask a question. I think Mr. Amodei brought up some issues around the staffing cuts and to agencies, and you and I had a chance to talk a little bit about that. So when it comes to the reorganization, the level of cuts that have been made, I expressed it in my opening remarks, and also to you individually, that we have deep concerns about how it was done with the probationary workers being fired and then people being offered these opportunities to resign, and we've lost some critical positions. So as you're moving forward and when we get a full budget, I hope we can be much more involved in the conversation about what are those strategic positions, where are we getting people back, and where could we have less people doing the work. So I know you've already expressed a lot of that. I do want to say we had one critical position at Acadia National Park in the Schoodic Peninsula, where there was only one licensed water operator, a critical position. That person resigned. I'm assuming it was because of the opportunity to resign. But the hiring freeze meant there's no opportunity to put a replacement in. So there's a critical position about clean water. It impacts all the people who visit the park. Yet at this moment, it's just kind of absurd that we can't do that. So if you could just take a quick look at that at some point.
I would say on that one, we had this situation at Yosemite too, where some of the people that were doing the water plant operations took the deferred retirement program option, and we were able to replace those positions. So if we need to bring somebody back in as a water operator at Acadia, we should talk, because we can get that position posted.
Thank you very much for looking at that. In this case, that would be very beneficial, so if you could look into that. They did, I think, get some temporary replacement because of an outside funding group. As you mentioned, there are these amazing organizations, Friends of Acadia, Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters, who really do help run our parks. I'm quite confident that they would not want to take the national park over. So as you're discussing that, and you did make that clear that you're thinking differently about the national parks than some of these other entities. But I do think we have to make sure there's a strong base of support before we give up, the national ownership of this. But let me just ask one last question about renewable energy. You're also the energy czar, so I know this is something you know a lot about, and obviously the work that you've done in North Dakota really speaks to your expertise around energy. But this administration has declared a national energy emergency. You talked a little bit about the AI arms race with China, and I know there's been a lot of expression from this administration about having AI dominance, and that just is a huge energy requirement. And I don't think we always put it in that context, but it's going to require great opportunities for renewable energy and other energies. So I think that your perspective now, from me watching on the outside, is that this administration and you are disregarding needed investments in renewable energy and focusing solely on fossil fuels. Renewable energy already generates about 21% of the electricity used in the United States, the wind alone accounting for 10%. Clean energy investments are estimated to save the average household $500 annually in reduced energy costs. In my home state of Maine, where we've put a real focus on this, conversion to heat pumps in our very oil-dependent state, we're not an oil producer, as well as rooftop solar panels has really reduced costs for a lot of people. So we see it as a cost reduction, and in meeting the future needs of greater energy, it seems like it should be in all of the above. I know you did just, I think last night, reinstate the construction of the Empire Wind Project, so I appreciate that coming back online. But you do, in your budget, eliminate all funding for renewable energy, effectively gutting this critical sector. Now, in my mind, this disregards the climate change concerns that we have and also the economic benefits. And I do know you were doing work in North Dakota on carbon neutrality, carbon capture. I've had the chance to observe a lot of carbon capture facilities in places as far afield as Norway and Iceland, and I know there's still questionable ability of them to do the job that needs to be done. So there seems to still be a critical role for renewable energy. So can you just justify your perspective? Am I missing something that you're doing that we don't know much about, since we're all just observing this from the outside?
Well, I would say that a key component to this is understanding the reliability, and I would have a disagreement around some of your statements on cost. And when you say that we're getting 20% of electricity from renewables, what I hear in that word is intermittent, because right now, without the battery technology, when the sun goes down every night, then whatever we claim we're getting from solar, at night it's zero. Thankfully, we need less electricity during the night, but it's zero, so it produces none. The wind is 10% when the wind is blowing. It may be slightly higher than that if the wind is blowing strongly, but when the wind's not blowing, it's zero. So then what we need to have, if we've got situations like on the day that President Trump was inaugurated, January 20th, which you all remember, I'm sure you were here, it was extremely cold, in the PJM grid so think Pentagon to Wall Street, think of all the essential activity, think 60 million people, about the same number of people that experienced that, the blackout in Spain, in this Washington to New York. At 5 in the morning, we had 0% coming from solar, and we had 70% coming from fossil fuels, 22% from nuclear, 6% from hydro and other oil and other sources, and 2% from wind. And so when we say that we've got 20% from renewables, that's on a good day. When we don't, we have to still produce 100% of the needs. So we still need the baseload. We still need the fossil fuels. We still need nuclear. And so that whole system has to remain in place. Otherwise, when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, then we don't have enough electricity. I mean, not even enough for AI. We don't have enough for hospitals and schools and Wall Street and the Pentagon. And so if you lay in the cost of having now to build two systems, then we're heading down the path of Germany. Germany spent $500 billion, $500 billion on wind and solar. They shut down all of their baseload fossil fuels. They shut down their nuclear, partly because, it's well understood that Germany, in a multi-party system where the Green Party was very influential in driving this, and they were never maybe 10 or 20% of the votes, but they were influential in driving the discussion. Russia was, just like, as a state, we were under cyber attack every day. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, every day coming after our missile sites, coming after our tribes, coming after our communities. Part of those cyber attacks include cyber operations filled with the kinds of things that would advantage an adversary. So Russia, it was to great advantage to have Germany deindustrialize, shut down all of their baseload, become highly dependent on Russian gas. And if anybody thinks that that wasn't what they were doing, I would just, you guys have got security clearances, go learn about it. And it is and so Germany went down that path. They spent $500 billion. They produced 20% less electricity than they did before, and their electricity is 3 times higher cost than it was before. So less reliability, higher cost. The price of electricity in Maine is exactly about 3 times what it is in North Dakota. And so when I hear that people say that renewables are somehow lowering electricity prices, that is just factually not true. It may be true at some marginal cost, but there's hundreds of billions of dollars, everything we've talked about here that would solve every problem for Interior with this little, $10 billion budget we're talking about that's being cut this and that. There's hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies for wind in the IRA. And I saw a legitimate report from legitimate people that the cost per kilowatt for offshore wind is 10 times higher than, it's like double onshore wind, and it's 10 times higher than a natural gas plant, that's like at the wellhead in Pennsylvania. And so part of what we're, as we pursued in North Dakota, and then you were saying carbon capture may not be working in Norway, it's working in North Dakota. And we've been doing it for 20 years. We have 42 million tons of CO2 that we've captured that's been shipped up to Saskatchewan. We got, zero carbon ethanol plants in North Dakota. We have some of the greatest CO2 storage in the world, that's right there. So when people tell me it's unproven, I would just invite them to come to North Dakota and see what we're doing. But on for the national, energy emergency, it's not necessarily about gas at the pump. It's about we don't have enough electricity, and the AI arms race is it's not for the tech companies. It's for national security. We can't have missile defense without AI. We will. That is there is no. When the bad guys are firing 400 missiles at Israel and we knock down 399 of them, it's not just because we have smart people. There is incredible IT systems that are causing that to happen. And then we all get up and go to work the other day and, only one missile got through. Oh, what else? What was the score of the baseball game? If all 400 missiles had landed on Israel, World War III would have started. We're stopping those kinds of catastrophic things from happening and wiping out an entire country or ally because of technology. And so we can't come in second in the AI arms race. This is like the nuclear race. We have to, and it's AI is going to transform every job, every company, and every industry. And right now, on the path that we're in, New England would have ended up with these really high electric costs, a huge, anti-natural gas bias. That we'd end up with New England, which is a huge part of our population, huge part of our thing, would have no advanced manufacturing, no AI data centers. There's not enough electricity to run that Micron chip plant in upstate New York unless we get more power that's coming from non-intermittent sources. We need the right mix of intermittent plus baseload. If we don't have enough baseload, the queue at FERC is 95% wind, solar, and batteries. 95% is wind, solar, and batteries. If we have 95%, when we're already in a destabilized, we're already at a point like I described on the inauguration day. We're already at this point where we're dangerously close to the tipping point of having too much intermittent to balance the grid. And the grid is the mother of all other networks. If the grid isn't working, then nothing works. Not at the Pentagon, everybody's IT systems. So electricity, we've just become so complacent about it, when in fact we've put ourselves at real risk as a country. And part of what the president cares about is that everybody, that all 48 states, and whether they voted for him or not, that everybody's going to make sure that we've got a resilient grid for a thing. Because there's economic development is going to go where the electricity is. That's the new thing. And electricity has never been worth more than it is right now in human history. A kilowatt hour today in an AI data center, it's not like a data center that does shopping claims or a shopping order or a health claim. I mean, that's what data centers in the past, okay, we're going to process a medical claim, we're going to process a shopping order. Today, an AI data center is actually turning electricity into intelligence. I mean, that's what AI is. It is like now, the current versions program, and they program as well as all but like the top 100 programmers in our country. So then if I was going to leave here today, walk out the door and start a company, I wouldn't need to hire 1,000 programmers like we used to. I got to hire a few and then have them have an army of robotic programmers called AI for practically free. And software has always been the thing that's transformed human capability in the last 40 years more than anything in human history. So we're at this precipice of incredible change. And then we've got states that are like, we're okay with really high electric prices and lack of reliability. They're going to just completely miss out. I mean, they'll deindustrialize just the way Germany did, and the population will move to places where you can actually get permits and pipelines built, because in the near term, the next 5 years, it's going to be natural gas. In the 2030s, nuclear can play a huge role, but we're at least 5 years away from that becoming a significant thing, and we've got to fix the permitting because we're a country where it takes you 10 to 20 years to build a nuclear plant. That doesn't work. With small modulars, we've got to go more quickly. Geothermal is, that's green, but it's persistent baseload. If we can get access to that 350 centigrade heat, below the ground, I mean, geothermal, but we got a little more material science we're doing. So I'm very optimistic. And then you started out with climate change, and I'm like, man, with AI and with all the new technologies and with nuclear, all that stuff that's coming in the next 10 years, we will solve the year 2100 temperature problem. I mean, we will solve that. With innovation. We can't solve it by regulating our sources of energy out of business now because we need that energy to create the solutions. And the existential threat that this administrations are focusing on is Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon, and we can't lose the AI arms race to China. That's the number one and number two. And if we solve those two things, then we will have plenty of time to solve any issues related to potential temperature change that's 70 years out. I mean, I know that for sure because of what's coming, because we're going to have capabilities we've never had before, and they're arriving literally right now that'll cure diseases, and it's going to change how, what we have to spend on education, what we have to spend on healthcare. All these things those budgets will get dramatically changed in the next decade based on the contributions of AI. But we won't have any AI if we don't have electricity, and if we don't have a sound energy plan, then we won't. So you can't separate national security and world peace and prosperity at home from our generation of energy. So that's the short answer. It's funny. Okay.
That was a short answer. So look, I didn't mean to get my whole committee involved in a conversation about what energy policy in the future should be, but I do appreciate the depth of your knowledge. I disagree on a few things. Look, we do not like having high electric rates anywhere in New England or in Maine, and we are not in the same situation as North Dakota. That's the reason yours are much lower, is because yes, we are moving natural gas into our state, but it had to move from somewhere else. You had the unique opportunity to have it right there under the ground. And I don't think that people of Maine are ready for offshore drilling off the coast of Maine, and most people don't think that we have resources of offshore drilling.
You won't need to offshore drilling, but what we do need is to get that mother load of gas from Pennsylvania through New York up to you, because right now 80% of the homes, as you know, in Maine are burning heating oil. Yeah. And so if you want to reduce CO2 in New England, the number one way we can do it is replace home heating.
Look,
heating with natural gas.
I do not want to disadvantage my colleagues by debating every possible point, but I will say I understand you about grid modernization. I think we all realize that we have a permitting process that doesn't work for anybody, whether you're a blue, red, or purple, or green state. It just doesn't matter. It's not working for any of us. I do believe that solar and wind belong in part of the mix. I believe we're investing in battery storage, and in many cases, that's the best way to go about doing it. All of these mixes have a real there's a reason for having a mix, and I understand that we have to have dependable load. I counter a little bit on the solar panels on the roof when they're very cheap. I personally have batteries in the basement, and it works just great for me, and it's much cheaper than having to import oil. So, look, there are a whole variety of ways to do it, and you've got a lot of...
I would just say, I want you to know I agree with that. I mean, rooftop solar, where you don't have to build a transmission line, and you've got for home use. That's one of the niche markets. But powering the grid with solar at large scale, that's not there because we've got a battery solution for you for your home. We don't have a battery solution for how to store enough power to run
I just
New York.
I just won on one point. Yes, but thank you. And really, we
It's
do have
not
a lot.
winning. We just agree.
No,
we
no,
agree.
we do
There's
agree.
places, but it's not the wholesale.
I agree. I'm just teasing, and I would love to see more of the carbon capture work. I have seen some interesting projects, and I'm not saying that they're not all got real opportunities. I'd love to come to North Dakota to do that. I will stop this for my colleagues' benefit.
But I would say, just to be clear, if Congress decided to eliminate subsidies for wind, then there would be no applications for wind projects. I mean, they've had 30 years of subsidies, and they've never made money, and they're not going to make money.
And people would argue that we've subsidized oil for many years, and that to have the kind of nuclear power that you're talking about will also require a lot of subsidies. So we do invest in energy choices. Carbon capture requires subsidies. Battery technology requires subsidies. We make these decisions. Anyway, I think I appreciate this argument very much, and appreciate the opportunity. I would love to talk to you more about it, and do believe it's part of our committee's mandate. And I will stop here because I know there are a lot of people who have questions, and I apologize for taking up all the time, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. I knew that if we got into energy, this was going to extend out the discussion. In fact, I've been told
leave it to me to try it.
Yeah, I've been told by some people that the limiting factor in the growth of our economy, it's not going to be available capital. It's not going to be anything. It's energy and the development and cost of energy.
It's 100% true.
Yep. Mr. Cole.
I won't take too much time, but I actually want to thank my friend, the ranking member, for provoking that discussion, because I just think it's such a demonstration of why we are so lucky to have you in the position you're in. I mean, the range of knowledge, the obvious professionalism, the management capability. I think you're going to have a brilliant tenure at Interior, and so that was one of the best discussions I've heard. And frankly, exactly what these hearings are for. So thank you very much for that, and it was a valuable contribution in and of itself. Second point, just to pick up something that was mentioned earlier, you talked about transferring some of these smaller portions of the national. Great idea. Oklahoma did something similar to that. We have a lot of remote locations that are important to tribal governments. But not particularly attractive in terms of tourism, and they were a cost drain. I would tell you not to just look at state governments, but to look at tribal governments. And in our case, we had the means to manage it, so it wasn't a matter. It was just something we wanted to do and have in our possession. Other tribes that, again, were similarly well situated. Doesn't work if the tribe doesn't have the financial resources to do that, but in our case, we did, and certainly in some of these other cases, you may find very willing partners. I would offer one, while you said never, never, never on the national parks, look at the Chickasaw National Recreational Area sometime, and I guarantee you we'd manage it better. And that's not to say the federal government does a bad job. They don't, but we would put more resources into it. And the park itself, the original core of it, was actually a contribution, a donation by the Chickasaw Nation to the federal government, simply because we were going through the Dawes Commission, and we didn't want that to fall. They were sacred springs to us. We didn't want it to fall into private hands. So, I mean, we're the ones that gave it to you. So if we ever wanted to buy it back, we'd like to have the option to sit down and talk. And actually, one occasion during the Obama administration, we did, and we also rebuilt all the Park Service's offices there. You lease them from us. They're much better facilities than you had. So I think there are places where you could find some willing partners in Indian country that would like to at least have a fruitful discussion with you. Last point I want to make, and this is really not directed at you, but it's something that both the chairman and I think our former chair, Mr. Cullum, mentioned. And that's this whole issue of getting information on the budget. And I'm not here to beat you up in the least about it, or frankly, the folks at OMB. We've had a good working relationship on a variety of fronts. They were very helpful during the CR, and we worked closely together. We're continuing to have a good dialogue. And I also recognize the new administration cannot possibly meet the deadlines that we impose in Congress. On February 15th, ain't no way. Somebody hadn't even got their people appointed yet. No administration's ever made that. But I just say this is it's not even a warning. It's just a recognition of reality. We are running out of time. If we're going to get these bills through our committee, we're going to start acting on our own, and we just don't have the details. Skinny budget's helpful, but it's not what this committee would want to have and every other subcommittee that we have. And frankly, it's not what you'd want to give us. You would want us to make intelligent decisions based on a deeper understanding of individual programs and wherever. But I think we're probably just pretty close to having to plunge in and deem a top-line number and make allocations and start moving. And this isn't all the administration's fault at all. I will tell you, Congress has been very remiss in actually passing a budget. We've been deeming budgets in a bipartisan way for the last several years. And we want to work closely with the president, so we're going to look pretty closely at his top lines and whatever. But the budget, even the skinny budget, I would just say without dragging everybody into detail, look, when you're using reconciliation money to build the budget, you're doing two things. Number one, we don't know that we have no jurisdiction over that money, and we don't know if it's going to happen yet. We don't know. It hadn't gotten through the House yet. Senate's another process. I can't budget on money that's not. I don't know is going to be there. So we're looking very closely at the lines, but the idea of using reconciliation money before we passed a reconciliation bill is difficult for us, and could really make it, extraordinarily difficult. Second problem that we have with reconciliation money and using that is it's going to create for us amazing cliffs in the future. It does run out, and so if you're using all that for defense, there's a point where it stops. And then all of a sudden, you're not looking at manageable increases. You're looking at tens of billions of dollars. The same thing will happen in Homeland, where my friend here will have that problem to wrestle with at some point. So I just say that, and again, I'm not being critical. I understand why it's being done that way. It's helpful. These are important investments that ought to be made, and they're also there is a political process here, and if anybody doesn't think if you want a defense hike, you don't have to pay for it on the other side of the ledger to get to the filibuster number in the Senate, then they just don't know how this game is played up here. So believe me, the Democrats spent a lot of money on the much misnamed Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan that was outside the normal appropriations process and didn't have a dime for defense or a dime for Homeland Security. Spent everything else under the sun and ignited the worst inflation outburst in 40 years, and probably indirectly elected the president that we have today that's dealing with these issues, because I think there was a reaction to that. But regardless, just as we go forward, I just want to use the occasion of your testimony here, which has been exceptional. Look, I've heard a lot of these things over 20 years, and we've certainly had other good secretaries, but your depth of knowledge about how these issues within 100 days, and more importantly, the experience that you bring as a governor, an administrator, successful business person, are just so obvious that I think you're going to have a lot of support for what you recommend and what you think, just based on the confidence people have in you. So an enormous asset for this committee to have somebody like you, because these are knotty problems. Friend Mr. Simpson's chaired it twice and has had to wrestle with them. I was on it for many, many years. And again, you'll find, particularly on tribal issues, this committee will actually probably be more engaged, and I say this with no disrespect, than our friends on natural resources. They certainly have some people there that understand tribal issues and care about them. They're a lot more bipartisan in this subcommittee, and there's a lot of depth of knowledge here on those issues on both sides of the aisle. So. But again, you bring that independently yourself. So I'm looking forward to some things that I think will be terrific for some of the most neglected and forgotten parts of the country. And I appreciate your commitment. So again, we are going to move ahead on the budget pretty quickly, but we would always welcome advice along the way. And I will tell you, depending on what happens with reconciliation, things can be adjusted later and changed around. But we got to get bills out of here. You want us to get them out of here, believe me, by the August break. We need to get some of them across the floor June and July, to have any chance of a bargain, toward the end of the year. And it will be a bipartisan bargain in the end. It has to be, because we don't have reconciliation in appropriations. So, we're going to have 60 votes in the Senate, and every time we get 60 in the Senate, I lose some votes here on my right wing. So, that's just the way it works. But we invite your participation in the process, and certainly the administration, because I do think, and this will be hard for my Democratic friends, final deal is going to be negotiated by the President of the United States. I mean, he's got to sign it, and anybody here that thinks he is not part of it are making the same mistake that I saw, in my view, my friends make. They could have had a better deal than a CR on the table, but they wanted to restrict a Republican president, and a Republican Senate and a Republican House aren't going to restrict a Republican president and then ask him to sign the bill. It's not going to happen. So, again, he'll be much more involved in the process this time than he was, because, to be fair, that process should have been finished up before he was ever president of the United States. That's not his fault. It's the fault of Congress for not getting this work done before he was inaugurated, and sort of dumping this mess on him. And again, bad on us on both sides of the aisle. We'll have a long discussion about why and how that happened sometime too. But again, I'm really appreciative of your leadership in the department, and really excited about what the prospects in front of us under your leadership are. You're back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Amity?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm more than a little intimidated after watching all the big kids take the deep dives at the deep end of the pool about all that other sort of stuff. But it's been very instructive for someone who brings limited resources. Just a couple of takeaway things that we're going to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To get back with you on, and I want to start out with Federal Land Transaction Facilitation Act. I'm not that familiar with it. But it's my understanding, at least in my neck of the woods, we haven't used that since Christ was a corporal, if ever. And so it's like, if there are reasons why, I know no districts in Nevada have used it. And so it's one of those things like, well, that's just always the way we didn't do it. If something needs to be fixed in that to make it as, like you mentioned when you just did this checkerboard thing with Utah, it's like, if there are tools other than passing a lands bill in Congress that are transparent and, all that other sort of stuff, then by all means. BIA law enforcement, twice in the last 6 months, because my folks in Native Nations country aren't big Indian country. And therefore, we don't have facilities on reservations like, hey, that's where you go lock somebody up or this or that. We struggle the same way everybody else does in terms of personnel and stuff like that. But inevitably, when somebody gets arrested in Indian country in Nevada, they've got an agreement with somebody either in Reno or in Las Vegas to lock them up until they go wherever. If those agreements go away, then they get driven to Arizona from like Elko or Winnemucca, theoretically. And so it was one of those things that I didn't think was broke, but I'm getting calls from sheriff's office going, hey, we just got a call from somebody at BIA, and they said, starting Monday, we're not paying you to do whatever. A lot of scrambling around. Fortunately, some of the leadership there backed those off, but I don't have the feeling that it couldn't happen again. So we're going to be visiting with your folks just to say, hey, if there's a problem, then let's address it. But let's not manage it by somebody calling somebody on the phone and going, you got to empty your jail of the folks that you're holding for XYZ tribe. Water. I was happy to hear that discussion, but I got to tell you something that happened recently. There was a FONSI issued on a hydro project. It's a FERC project for the most part, but it involves a lot of BLM land, so the Ely district office is on it. And we got a big thing in Nevada. I know it'll come as news. Groundwater is the exclusive jurisdiction of the state engineer. And so we always press the BLM offices there when they're doing subwater. Did you call the state engineer? Not telling you how to decide. Did you call the state engineer? No. And I thought, what? So we call the state engineer and the director of conservation and natural resources. Anybody from BLM call you? No. Now your acting state director has done a great job. We got on the phone and said, hey, listen, how hard is it to acknowledge that there's something that involves groundwater in issuing this and that somebody at least called the office and whatever? And I got to tell you, I was a little disappointed. From the Ely district, we got some pushback. Well, there's no significant impact. It's like, really, are you a licensed water engineer in the state of Nevada in the Ely district office? And I mean, it's not nefarious, but it's like, if you want completeness of your action, I would think you would check that box. So I think we've got that fixed, but I can't stress that enough when you own most of it to say, hey, the only thing we really have jurisdiction over that didn't used to be in question was we don't do groundwater in the state of Nevada. That's the state engineer. So we're going to be following up on that. It bugs me, and you can see why. And the last thing I'm going to we had talked briefly about it, and if there's a reason for it, fine. And I want to give Dave Bernhardt some credit. During his tenure, he moved a solicitor out of the California solicitor's office up to help John Raby out, managing Nevada. And it's like, listen, it's not, I don't have anything against people in California other than the stuff that everybody else does, but I'm sitting here looking at this. You got 3 district offices in California. You manage about 15 million acres. Forest Services manage 20. And in Nevada, you've got 6 districts wholly in Nevada, and you manage a zillion more acres. I don't know what the thing is. It's 47.8 in Nevada. And so I'm nothing against the people in California. I don't know them. But I can't imagine a scenario where the governor, for instance, of North Dakota would get his legal advice from somebody in another state. And when you talk about the importance of community and how important it is for you to go places and see things, when you're giving probably the largest BLM real estate operation in the country, which is in Las Vegas, when they're getting their advice from 500 miles away in a different state, it just doesn't sound like strong administrative stuff to me. And so I know there's been people have looked at the workload stuff, and I know this is the way that we've always done it. And I'm not saying, but it's like, why are we going to California, whose mission is a third of what it is in Nevada? And listen, BLM, Interior, is like the super federal agency in Nevada. No offense to Defense and all those other ones, but it's like, you're the guy in Nevada, and rightfully so. And so I just think it's a weakness in the administrative setup in terms of how we support what's got to be one of the most challenging state director jobs. And by the way, you did good in John Raby's back, in a temporary thing. If it's not career non-enhancing, we'd like him back. But no disrespect on that. But I just think that's where you're like, when you're trying to work the problem out in Winnemucca, it's like, well, what's the problem here, whether it's permitting or whatever? Well, the solicitor said no. Well, who's the solicitor? Well, they're over there. And it just seems like it could use a new set of eyes. And if you say, hey, we like it the way it is, and here's why, then fine. But just on the surface thing, because it's the way we've always done it, doesn't sound like it ought to go forward. And so I want to thank you for your time and your involvement in your first 100 days. You've been ACES in the term of availability for us. I appreciate it. And we'll look forward to following up with your folks and continuing to do good things to get the policy right.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman for allowing us to intervene in his time.
Yeah, I'd like the way, on behalf of Ms. Malloy,
I was going to say, is there a question in there?
That's why I stuck around.
Thank you, Secretary Burgum, for being here today. We appreciate it and look forward to working with you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I still have the ranking member and you here. One thing that didn't come up today, but we talked about working together. One thing that I wanted to share with this group that we could work on together is that we've uncovered that there's about 48,000 probate cases that are unresolved in Indian country. Yeah. And this has an effect on housing. Someone dies, apparently the current process is they come and say no one can live in this house until we figure out who owns it. I've been described to me that there's during my meetings with tribal leaders that they have in neighborhoods some places where there's a measurable percentage of the homes have got police tape around it and boarded up and can't live there because it's stuck in probate. Then it's stuck for years. So I said, oh, is that one incident? Can we go fix that thing? I come back and my team digs around for a while, and then they say, no, there's 48,000 of these. We're trying to work through this. So we've created some strike teams, but that's an area where we're going to have to get creative, both on, this could be an application for AI to dig through this stuff. I mean, and from a paralegal standpoint, to speed up the process for the actual limited lawyers we have to do it. But anyway, we've got to do that. And then as we continued that search, then it also led to places like Oklahoma, North Dakota, and others Arizona, where we've got allottees that have mineral rights, and then they're not receiving their checks. And we've had some people that have, I've been told, have gone through the entire shale revolution and never received a check. I mean, 15 years gone by and the allottees passed away, and now we're trying to figure out who their relatives are, and they're holding it in suspension. And it was like, what do we think the dollars are? And the numbers for individuals could be hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't have a factor on that yet. And then the tribes themselves that have tribal land that is not resolved from a probate standpoint, so we don't know the ownership, then we're holding that. And in some cases, the companies that develop the mineral resources may be holding it in suspension, and they haven't paid it because they said, well, we don't know who to pay the mineral royalty. Well, then we're really at risk because it's not the federal government holding it. Yeah. Now we got a company that could go out of bankrupt. That could be hundreds of millions more. So at first glance, we could be staring at a $500 million problem. And when I say, hey, it's a trust responsibility for the federal government to be taking care of the resources of our tribal partners, and we can't even process these basic functions for them. I mean, no other community would put up with this. I mean, or we all would have heard about it, because it'd be like, if this was, name any other situation other than tribal where this wouldn't be front page news. And then you got to find. And I've been working on tribal stuff for 8 years, and I've just learned about this one after I got, like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So you keep digging, there's more stuff. But anyway, that's something that if your staff or others have got background or awareness or ideas, or if some tribe has figured it out, but I think this is a federal. I think this is in our hands, and we've got to figure out the systems. This goes back to the underspend on IT systems.
Appreciate it. And we look forward to working with you on that issue and many other issues across the department. Again, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you taking time to answer all our questions and hear about the issues, obviously, that are important in our district. With that, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Thank you all.
I've got my drive.